Hello and welcome everybody to our Coffee Talk mini-series, the fast track to the compliance with the EU directive, one of our favorites in this time of the year. My name is Henrike and I'm talking with
Margrét Bjarnadóttir.
So good to see you again, Margrét.
Likewise, good to be with you.
You know what's going to happen. We have a nugget today, and our nugget today will focus on job listings and pay ranges and what the EU Pay Transparency Directive actually means when pay information becomes a visible signal in the labor market, rather than just one of these internal HR concepts. And I want to start questioning you, Margrét, because when companies actually put pay ranges into job ads, they are putting very concrete numbers into the labor market. The question is, from your perspective, Margrét, how should we actually think about those ranges? What is it? What exact numbers are they? Are they like something goes public, one number, more numbers? What's the pay range?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, what is pay range and what goes into them? Maybe I can take a step back and just start with telling you a little bit about what we have observed in the US, because depending on the states, there have been transparency legislations in place. It started with Colorado quite a few years ago. So we are actually running an academic study on this data. So interestingly, like one big interesting thing from my perspective is that, you know, prior to the legislation, obviously people are not in general, or organizations are not generally putting their salary information in the job listings, but still some, because there might be internal policies of transparency. And then interestingly, when the law kicks in, the compliance is less than 50%, which to me is mind-blowing. So half the organizations are actually not following the law when it comes to pay transparency. So I thought that was super interesting. And then we have been doing a lot of kind of cleaning and trying to extract. So we have access to hundreds of millions of job listings, and we are extracting the salary information from these job listings and looking at them. And some of them are nonsensical, you know, and I think many of the nonsensical ranges sometimes even make the news, like, oh, the pay is from 50,000 to 500,000. I mean, that's not the sensible range, right? So, so compliance is one thing that has been, you know, impressively low in the US. So it will be interesting to see what happens over in Europe. I hope compliance will be really high, because it's a really interesting data just to study what is happening in the labor market, which brings me to kind of the core of your question. So what is actually in these salary ranges? And that really depends. So when I kind of scan, you know, conversation boards of compensation professionals that are discussing, you know, which ranges do you put in there? And a lot of the discussion is around, you know, prospective employee management and setting expectations. So a lot of the conversations about, oh, you know, do you know, because most organizations have like pay ranges, right, between min and a max, and the conversation is, oh, do you put the entire pay range there, or do you put the portion of the pay range that you expect to hire the candidate in? And you know, some of the conversation is really interesting. Like there was one person who was saying, well, you know, everybody thinks they're awesome, so everybody thinks that they should be at the top of the range, so I don't want to go from min to max, because then their expectation is at the max, right? So I think that also goes back to, you know, what we've been talking so much about in this series, is about setting expectations and being able to communicate how salaries are determined, right? So if you can communicate to a, you know, a prospective employee, you know, this is how we decide, you know, where in a salary range, you know, our employees are, and giving your credentials and your experience, you know, you would be placed right here with the possibility to grow, right? Having that conversation and being clear, I think, is something that is part of the journey that every organization is on. Like, how do we talk about the ranges? How do we explain them? and come up with good policies. If there isn't an explanation, then that's the first step. So there's a lot of interesting conversations, and I think there's a lot of just maturing that needs to happen from everybody's side. So from organization side, we have to come up with the processes and policies so that we are comfortable talking about this. And from the prospective employee side, we also have to become familiar with how with having these conversations and not expecting that we are all awesome, that we're all top 10%. So I think there will be, and I think things will mature. So one of the things that we've been studying in some detail is actually whether the ranges, so once the law hits, do we observe that the ranges are growing or shrinking after the law hits? And right now it's kind of, if anything, they widen up a little bit in our kind of results that we have. So, but my sense is that companies right now are very cautious, so that they are posting these wide ranges rather than targeted ranges. And then it will be interesting to see how that will evolve, because I think we will figure out what is a good way to do this.
But I have a thought on the wideness of them being so wide, because I always have this thing in my mind, like you said, from between 50 and 500, it's a bit big. Yeah. But what would be sort of a good range? And I often think, I know of a company that says they are trying to shrink their ranges, and their ranges are too broad, they think, and they have a range of plus minus 10%, and they think it's broad. And I have others that have ranges of plus minus 30%, and they feel happy. And it's like, for me personally, I always think, how do you actually explain the differences in those ranges? And there we are, of course, with our variables and explanatory factors of experiences or whatever. But it's so unclear the moment that I see the job ad and I just see a wide range. And when you say, well, you have to be able to explain it when you see it, the employee needs to somehow, the potential employee needs to understand at that point, I believe already, what the range means, because otherwise you are expecting something that you're going to get explained in a job discussion where you might not even go to because you didn't understand it up front. So there's a lot to be explained before even publishing that number, let's put it that way. And do you see anything, how they are coping with that? Because I don't know.
So, no, so the type of information that's giving out really depends on the position also. Yep. So I would, we see, very different descriptions for hourly employees compared to, blue worker employees versus white collar, blue collar workers versus white collar workers, etc. So your question was already, so yeah, companies do, they don't explain the ranges very well. But I think the range also depends on the variability. If we are doing a job and everybody does a similar job, the range should be quite tight, right? Yeah. When you have different roles where there's more variability and you want to be able to award your best performers, if that's your policy, then you need a wider range, right? So to me, one company having plus minus 10% and thinking that's too wide, while another one has plus minus 30% and being comfortable with it, it really depends on the nature of the work that's being conducted. So, and we see that as well. So, yeah, I think there is just a lot of variability from one organization to the next on how they're tackling this. And it will, the dust hasn't settled on this because it's so new. So it will just be very interesting to follow.
Then I have one little last thought. Of course, the difference between different companies is one thing, but if you see published ranges in like one company, do you think or see that those published pay ranges help this one organization to stabilize their pay practices, or does it expose them, let's say, to more volatility, or what happens then? Do you see something happening inside this one company when they do that?
So, I mean, not without having like private conversations with professionals. Like that's not public domain knowledge. So we've been, I mean, one of the hypotheses that we are researching is whether kind of the job market will stabilize around certain things, because this is important information. Like I said, it remains to be seen. But one thing that is interesting to think about is that we will have all of this information out there, and companies are already mining this information and selling the information. So you can also think about kind of information asymmetry between the organization and the potential employee. So the organization can buy this data, understand how their competitors are setting wages, etc. It's very hard for an individual to mine through the same data. So there might be kind of information asymmetry that will happen that might not necessarily benefit the job seeker.
Yeah.
So I would just throw that out there.
That's a good ending. That's a good ending. I think for pay ranges and job listings, we're done for today in this little nugget. Thank you so much, Margrét. I hope it's enough food for thought for all our listeners.
I hope so too. All right. Thank you, Henrike.
Goodbye.
Bye.